unravel the key AFL strength and conditioning principles to making sure your team is in peak shape for finals, or for individual athletes listening out, making sure you're in peak shape. I'm going to be discussing things like what does peak performance look like for those that haven't felt it, fundamentals of strength and conditioning in the AFL. We've got periodized training cycles for finals, whether you're in finals now or coming up in September, and the key to consistency in your strength and power program. And lastly, about elite lifestyle, how to live a lifestyle that's going to be conducive to being at your best at the point of the end of the year. Stick around to the end. I've got a free workout to improve your aerobic capacity. So for those that want to be able to run a games better, or if you're in your off-season mode and you want to attack your aerobic capacity over the off season, got a fantastic work for you at the end. So wait till the end for that. And then for strength and conditioning coaches, our recent finding from the LinkedIn and Twitter poll, both what is your favorite social media strategy, as well as a favorite method for assessing athletes' readiness to compete. Heart rate variability, subjective, counter movement jump, or screening. So let's get straight into it. First, what does preparing for peak performance look like? Number one, you want to have a supportive team around you. So for those that aren't lucky enough to be in a NAB League team or a state league team like the VFL, and of course an AFL club, then you won't have access to a sports dietitian, a sports psychologist, a strength and conditioning coach, high performance coach, and you won't have access to as much recovery methods, so massage therapists potentially at your club, and physiotherapists as well from a rehab point of view, and looking after your body. So you want to make sure you try and build your own support team around you with the budget that you can from a sustainable point of view. So what does that look like? I would recommend having a strength and conditioning coach and a key medical practitioner like a physiotherapist in your corner from now all the way through to hopefully grand final day. Really important that if you've already been following a program, you don't change the program, so stick fat. We don't want to be changing too much at this time of year. You just want to be doubling down on your program and making sure that you're not just going through the motions in August. I'll talk about it a little bit later with the strength and power program, but with your training to feel like you're going into your game fresh and only focusing about recovery. We still want a training stimulus. So really important for peak performance. Hard training is still very much relevant during your week, and also having a support team around you. Big key aspect of peak performance is your routine. So making sure you're really clear on what your routine looks like each day leading up towards game day. So that starts for the day post game. So we played Saturday, +1 is Sunday for that Saturday game, +2 Monday, and so forth. +3 is Tuesday. So every day you want to have a clear focus and a routine that you tick off every day to ensure that you're preparing for the next training session. So for most of you play Saturday, it's probably going to be Tuesday. So how can you maximize that you're going to be in the best place to train well with quality on that Tuesday? And then ultimately, what are you doing Wednesday to make sure that you're ready for your main session of the week being on Thursday for that week, so you're primed going into your game. We don't want to just flip into gear come finals. You want to start practicing now. So by the time that you hit finals, you're not changing anything. You know exactly what success looks like every day, what works for you specifically, and what doesn't. So you've got your tools there to lean on. And that may change depending on what your week throws at you. If you've got a really demanding week at school with assignments and exams, what are your tools that you use to cope with those stressful weeks? You may also have a high demanding physical week, house sports, club sport, and perhaps some extra training sessions at school that are conflicting with your club football training. So what are you doing to mitigate the risk of injury, to making sure that you're well recovered for that week going into your game? So use every experience to prepare yourself so nothing's new, nothing catches you off surprise, and you've got things to lean on that you know work well for you come finals. So that routine is key. Have a reflection practice. That could just simply be what worked well for you that week. particularly for the games that you played really well, and you're happy with your performance, and you feel like your preparation had something to do with that. What did you change from the week prior that you're going to continue in your routine? And conversely, on the ones that the game didn't quite go well, perhaps you had a start. You started slow, and it took a while to get into the game. What did the week look like? Don't just look at the morning of that game and think that is the reason, or what you did the night before. Look at the whole week. I think too often we can just look at, what did I changed my breakfast, or I didn't really warm up with as much intensity, or I slept in. It's those things do make an impact, but look at it as the bigger picture is what did the whole week look like? How was it different to the week prior? And ultimately learn from those experiences as well. And then your preparation, like I said before, really maximizing every training session and make sure you got clear focus on your game. So if Tuesdays are lighter, more of a recovery-based session, make sure your skills are on point. You're really focusing on hitting your kicks, your leading patterns, whatever is important for your game. And then on the Thursday, make sure you're bringing above match intensity to at least 2 drills so you're primed, prepared, and ready to perform that weekend. Next one's the fundamentals of strength and conditioning in the AFL. So typically for a training session, we'll have a performance prep or some sort of routine where we're doing some mobility drills, some running drills, light movement to start with. So like some ground-based mobility, some foam rolling, and you're just working on waking the body up, essentially getting the body activated, hitting some good movement positions, some good angles that we're going to use on the field. So things like releasing your hamstrings, your groins, your upper back, your ankles. So make sure that everything feels good as you start to increase the intensity during the performance prep. And you might be doing some plyometrics to work on some explosive energy, elastic strength. Then we go into your on-field warm-up, where we're working on things like your first 3 steps of acceleration, making sure we've got good angles. You're making sure that you're not you're putting force into the ground appropriately, so you've got good mechanics. And also working on your lateral speed, your agility, so some reactive components, getting the balls involved, the coaches involved, and working on your power cutting, your drop stepping, lateral shuffles, being able to swivel the head quickly, and making sure that you're really alert and going into your first football drill. So that warm up on field should be high intensity in nature. You might do some sprinting work in that main training session as well, so getting exposed to some max velocities using the centre square 50-metre space to hit some high speed. And then typically we're going to move into your football program, and that's where we want to get majority of your running loads. So if those use GPS, majority of your running loads with a football involved. That's the key to AFL strength and conditioning right now. So if you want to have that AFL experience and use it, and you don't have access to a coach or you can't work with us for whatever reason, then make sure you apply these practices to your training during the week. And then from there, we individualize the strength and power work in the gym. So using things like wellness, heart rate variability, checking in with the athlete, how they're feeling, how they pulled up from the game, working closely with the medical team, specifically physios, on how they're screening on the bed, and how's their body moving, what's their mobility like, to adjust their loads in the gym and on the field. We also want to maintain good chronic exposure, because that's insurance, that's a vaccine to preventing for soft tissue injuries like hamstrings, groin injuries, calf injuries. So this time of year isn't the time that we want to drop off. And as an AFL strength and conditioning coach, we're focused on making sure we're maintaining good chronic exposure for some that perhaps didn't play as much game time, or they didn't, their loads during training due to their mindset, whatever it is dropping off. We want to make sure we're getting them some extra top-up conditioning to ensure that they've kept their chronic load, which is just their 4-week average of distance and high speed and sprint distance, in a good spot to make sure come finals they're ready for whatever comes at them. So maintaining enough workload is also really, really important. We don't want to just always be stripping workload off the athletes, because in a couple of weeks' time, their base is going to be reduced, and therefore you're putting them at risk of having a spike in a potential game or a really demanding game week, which typically finals, you're going to pick up your intensity and you're going to pick up your running loads. So we want to prepare for that for August. Moving into periodizing training cycle for finals. This is where we want to focus on two key areas as strength and conditioning coaches. We want to make sure we're maximizing intensity. So the intensity of the football program, the intensity of the athletes are attacking everything that we're doing from warm up to agility to speed run throughs. We want to make sure there's real purpose to everything that we're doing. So intensity is key because we're working on a mantra of, generally speaking, minimum effective dose for the athletes. So it's not the time of year where we're just going to be putting in extra long-term athlete development focuses for players. Typically, it's going to be all about what does that athlete need to make sure that we're going to be able to prepare well for this week, but also for the weeks to come for this current season. So everything that we're doing is for the now. We're not so much focusing on doing things for 3 years down the track. So we want to make sure we're getting that minimum effective dose, because if we over prescribe our load, we're going to elicit more fatigue on that system, and that's going to reduce your ability to perform in that current game. So we want to make sure we're getting that prescription right. So intensity is key. Make sure we're getting high intensity, because naturally the volume of our workload is going to be slightly down during the week to be able to manage the intensity of the game of finals on the weekend. So being really deliberate with our on-field prescription, being really deliberate with our in-gym work. It's from a strength and Richard, you go into our next topic of consistency of the strength program. It's not the time to necessarily play around with progressions and regressions of an exercise. We want to have definitely change to the program, and you might be in a block now for another couple of weeks, and at the end of August, perhaps there's a bye week in between your home and away season and your season. That's when we bring in a new program and we stick with that program for the whole finals campaign, because what we want is familiarization. The body's going to be really efficient at adapting from those exercises, those movement patterns. Whereas if you're throwing new exercises at the athlete all the time, you're constantly getting delayed muscle soreness, which is part of the fatigue system. Your body's also going to be doing potentially less quality of movement reps as you're having that learning effect for the first couple of sets of that exercise. Whereas if you've been doing that exercise, you've been coached that exercise, the athlete knows what success looks like. The coaches are familiar with it. They know how to cue it for that athlete. It's familiar for everyone, the whole environment. You're going to get better intensity, better quality movement, and you're going to be pulling up. The athletes will be pulling up better for it. So, making sure that you're really deliberate with the exercise that you're using. The athletes are familiar with it, and there's change, but there's not a lot of change. Like I said, you might be in a block now, and then you go through a new block for that finals campaign, and you stick with it. Last one, elite lifestyle. So the big three, I harp about this all the time, and I've done specific podcasts on and presentations for in our academy membership on sleep, nutrition, stress. Those three need to be absolutely on point. If they're not, and you're aware of that right now, and you're listening to this podcast, and your sleep has got out of whack, you're going to sleep at like 12 o'clock. You want to make sure you really start to focus on getting that in order and making sure that your routine is key. There's lots of research out there. There's lots of tips out there on how to improve your sleep hygiene. So check those out. If you're listening to podcasts, search for sleep on a podcast. You can listen to it that way on YouTube. No doubt some of our AFL educational content will come up. From a nutrition perspective, the basics are key. So making sure you're eating healthy food. The source of that food, where you're getting it from, is of the highest quality that you can afford, and it's fresh, and you enjoy eating the food as well. So making sure your nutrition is down pat, and then from a stress point of view, making sure that whatever your life stresses are, you have coping strategies to be able to manage them. So that's not burning your mental energy. So if you're feeling like you're getting to training sessions and you're finding it hard to concentrate, you're moody, you're not enjoying the training, look at what are some life stresses that are taking away from that focus. It might be assignments that are due, like I said. It might be some relationship issues. It could be people you hang around with outside of your sport. It's not supportive of your training regime. So think about the top 5 people that you're hanging around with. Is that causing stress? We want to make sure that everything is in order. If you want to have peak performance, everything needs to be in check to be able to maximize that. So ultimately, every day you should be waking up and excited to get out of bed and having fun with what you're doing. And if you're not, then look at what's your environment, what's your sleep, what's your stress, what's your nutrition, and what can you do to control those controllables. And in saying that, there's going to be some days that are just naturally going to be challenging, and there's a roller coaster with it. Expect those. Those your biggest learnings are from those challenges. But for a majority of the time, I want to make sure you, especially early on in your career, you're excited about the day. You're excited about what's in front of you, and you're enjoying the process, because that's probably more important than all these tips combined. Is make sure you're having fun. So that's it for a formula of how to apply an AFL strength and conditioning process to any level of football that you're playing. As I mentioned there's no technology in there that you can't afford. There's no resource that you can't have access to. They're all things that you can focus on and make tweaks to now in August, to make sure come September you play the best finals campaign you've ever played. So I'd love to hear about some changes that you made from listening to this podcast. If you could direct message me, that would be fantastic to see who's applying the content, and how you found and what changes you made as well from applying the content. That'd be fantastic. Just email me direct message me at Prayer Like a Pro on Instagram or TikTok. Moving into the podcast this week, we have Blair Mills at 4 p.m. on this Wednesday, so make sure to tune in for that one. Brenton Parsons' episode will be released on our podcast platform, the Strength and Power Coach of the Gold Coast Titans. And our bite-sized episode for the week is with Dean Philippoulis. He's the reconditioning, rehab coach at the Collingwood Football Club. I hosted that interview a couple of years ago, so we're releasing 10 minutes of highlights from that episode. If you love it, check out Dean Philippoulis on our podcast for the full interview. Shout out to the DGR podcast. Selwyn Griffith, my manager, the high performance manager of Melbourne Demons, recommended this one. I've listened to it twice in the last 4 days. It's fantastic, with Alan Murdoch, specifically focused on accelerated return to play and the importance of coordination-based training. So highly recommend you check it out. The DGR podcast with David Gray interviewing Alan Murdoch. If you work in the rehab space, you'll absolutely love this highly detailed, thorough interview, and how Alan breaks it down. He's also got an 8-week coaching course that I'm inquiring about and would love to get involved in that mentorship. So check out that podcast and check out Alan Murdoch's work. It's good to get him on the radar. Poll for this week, we had 25% of people who you were on LinkedIn use Twitter as their main social media strategy. 71% were Instagram, and a couple of percent were other. 0% for Facebook. On LinkedIn, it was 0% Twitter, 50% Instagram, and 50% LinkedIn. The post for this week, that's the least amount of posts for any poll that I've ever done as well. So it's clearly not a popular topic, so I don't think I'll be posting that poll again. But moving on to this week, it's going to be, which method do you find most effective for assessing athlete readiness to compete? The 4 options I'll put on our LinkedIn and Twitter for this poll will be heart rate variability, subjective wellness, and asking the players how they're feeling. So the athlete intuition and body intelligence, counter movement jump, or any form of force plate testing, and screening, typically done with the physiotherapist, movement screening based movements. So your force rate testing, NORBOARD, and mobility tests. Love to get you involved in that one, so please check me out on LinkedIn, Jack McLean, or Prepare Like a Pro on Twitter to contribute to that poll. I'll post it this. So if you listen to the podcast, I'll post it on Saturday, and then for those listening into the live, that's in 2 days' time. Aerobic capacity. So the workout for this week that I promised, you need to have a 2K time trial or a 6-minute test. So you need to know your maximum aerobic speed for this test, which is just simply knowing the average speed that you move at for a test that goes between 6 and 10 minutes. Once you've got that speed, you're going to run 200 meters at your MAS pace. So for someone that's run a 6-minute 30, that's 5.1 meters per second, which works out to be 39 seconds. All right, so you're going to run the first 239 seconds. Then you're going to do so that's quite a high speed run. Then you're going to do slower run for 200 meters. So it's a 400 meter effort in total. Continue. So you run the second 200, that float at 80% of your maximum aerobic speed. So for someone with a 6 minute 30 pace, that's 48 seconds. And then we're going to go every 2 minutes. So pretty challenging workout, aerobic endurance workout. I like to program 4 to 5 sets of that. So it's about 8 to 10 minutes of work. Average heart rate will be right in that zone where we want. You'll get some exposure above 90% of heart rate, depending on where you are in with your session. Typically, I program this work at the end of the football session. So we get good exposure of 90% max heart rate, but also a great opportunity to work on rhythm running under some fatigue. So give that a go and let me know how you find it. Thank you for everyone that's tuned into this live chat. Looking forward to seeing you with our episode with Blair Mills this Wednesday at 4 p.m.